Hello and welcome. Today I'm going to talk about the garden pond. Now you, dear viewer, may say, Steve, I'm not interested in garden ponds. I want to grow vegetables and fruit and flowers. Why would I be interested in a garden pond? Well, let me give you my 3 reasons. Firstly, if you want any aquatic or semi-aquatic life in your garden, of course, you're going to have a pond. So, if you want fish, or if you want amphibians, such as frogs and newts, or even insects, such as dragonflies, you're going to need a pond. Second, in the summer here, it gets very, very hot, and there is no rain for weeks. And it's a question of life and death for the local fauna to have a watering hole somewhere. And your pond will act as a watering hole, and it will be a lifesaver for a lot of the local fauna. Hedgehogs, birds, and so on. And the third thing is simply aesthetic. I think a pond always adds a certain interest to any garden. Now, going back to my first 2 points, why do we want all this fauna in our garden? Well, basically, they are our allies. All these little animals will be ensuring that there is a balance in the garden. And all those little bugs that want to eat your lettuces and your other vegetables and fruit will be controlled by their natural predators, which are attracted to your garden because of this little watery oasis. So there we are. Those are my reasons. That's the end of the philosophy of having a garden pond. So why don't we see what is involved in making one? Let's go for it.
So, to make a pond, usually we need a spade and plenty of elbow grease. But for the sake of the demonstration, I've miniaturized everything. So we need to start by making a hole. I've made a little hole here. And then, to ensure that the hole is waterproof, we would usually put in some kind of liner, or maybe a preformed plastic pond, which you buy at the garden centre. Or alternatively, we can recycle something, like an old bath, for example. Of course, you need to plug the holes in it, but apart from that, that would serve perfectly. Recycling's even better. Now, as I said, I've miniaturized everything, so at great personal expense and by the magic of internet, here we have my model pond. Now, what we could do is put this directly in the hole. But there's a danger there that stones or pieces of metal or even roots in the earth could in fact pierce our liner. So what we need to do is protect it. So here I have my miniature sponge, but imagine this is a piece of old carpet. That would protect the liner perfectly. So what we do first of all is we put our piece of old carpet, for example, in the hole, and then we put in the pond. Now, one thing we have to ensure is that is level. And we have to do that now before we put the water in, because once we put the water in, it'll be impossible to maneuver the pond. So again, I take my miniature spirit level and I check that it is level. So there we are. The pond is now finished. All we need to do now is fill it.
Okay, so that was the how-to. So now, let's go and take a look at a real one.
So, here it is, the real McCoy, the pond. It doesn't look much, does it? This little watery oasis. Okay, it's a blustery, grey February day, so it's not looking its best. But this little oasis, as I said, is a magnet for the local wildlife, and of course it has even its own ecosystem with of course fish inside and frogs when the weather's good. We have to wait a couple of months for that. So let's take a closer look, shall we? So let's take a look at the pond in detail. Here at the bottom of your picture you have a solar powered aerator. This basically oxygenates the water by producing little bubbles in the water. Instead you could have a fountain or a waterfall. The one thing to know about fountains, if you have a fountain and you live in a windy area like me, the problem is the water doesn't fall back into the pond, but it tends to go all over the garden, so it's not very practical. Around the pond we have these roof tiles which are basically recycled. I found a pile of them in the garden when we bought the house, so I decided to recycle them around the edges of the pond. And here, rather importantly, it's just a rock that is entering into the pond, which allows an access to and from the pond for wildlife, particularly if anything falls into the pond accidentally. It can just swim over to this and then exit the pond here. A very important point for safety: if you have toddlers, small children, you must put some kind of grill or something over the pond to protect them from drowning. The only thing is, make sure that the grill has big enough holes to allow the passage of small animals such as frogs or hedgehogs or whatever to get to the water, but obviously the holes must be small enough to stop your children falling into the water. So there we are. That is the pond in its entirety on a very blustery, miserable February day.
So it's the end of the video on ponds. I hope you enjoyed it. Following me there's a little section called Tips and Tricks, which is a list of things to consider if you have a pond, where you can just pause the video to read what comes up on the screen. So, thanks for your attention. See you next time. Bye for now.